Hello and welcome to the Comp Pod. I'm Andy.
And I'm Ivy. Thanks for joining us. Imagine you go to the grocery store, you load up your cart with, the essentials, head to the checkout, and the cashier hands you this remarkably long receipt.
Right, like normal.
Yeah, exactly. You look it over, expecting the usual breakdown, like apples, $2, bread, $3. But then right in the middle of the receipt, there's a single line item that just says, miscellaneous stuff. And the price next to it is $500.
Wow. Yeah, and you would never just hand over your credit card and walk away from that transaction.
No way.
You would demand to know what exactly is inside that miscellaneous category before paying.
You would ask a lot of questions. But in the world of medical billing, specifically when we are talking about medical equipment, that exact scenario is playing out every single day.
It really is.
That miscellaneous stuff line item is showing up on the receipt. And it is a massive reason why costs in the system are surging at just an absolute breakneck pace. Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive.
Yes, our main focus today.
We are going to uncover the hidden drivers behind the surging costs of medical equipment and explore how simply turning on the lights, getting actual product-level visibility into what is being paid for can, solve the problem.
And to do this, we're looking at a highly detailed article published by Healthy Systems. It's titled, Escalating Costs, Trends in Durable Medical Equipment. And the numbers they present right at the outset really frame the magnitude of what we are dealing with here.
The foundational statistic here is just staggering. Between service year 2012 and 2024, the average cost of medical equipment spiked by a massive 87%.
87%. It's huge.
Right. Now, you might be thinking, well, I don't work in medical billing, so why does this matter to me? But, you interact with these healthcare systems. We all do.
Absolutely. We all pay for it in one way or another.
Exactly. Understanding the structural why behind these costs fundamentally changes how you view medical innovation, how you view your own healthcare administration, and frankly, how you understand the way complex administrative systems handle new technology.
Well said. And before we can understand how to solve this cost puzzle, we really need to clearly define the pieces on the board. In this case, the 87% spike was primarily driven by a specific category, durable medical equipment, or DME.
Okay, let's unpack this because durable sounds like we're talking about industrial machinery or something.
Right.
What actually makes a piece of medical equipment durable in the eyes of the billing system?
It is a very specific 5-part designation. To be classified as durable medical equipment, the item first has to be able to withstand repeated use over a long period.
Okay, so it's not a single-use item.
Exactly. Second, it must serve a primary medical purpose. Third, it has to be appropriate for use in the home.
Oh, interesting. So we are not talking about like a massive MRI machine bolted to a hospital floor.
Far from it. It's entirely focused on home use.
Right.
Fourth, the equipment has to be expected to last for at least 3 years. And finally, it is typically only useful to someone who is currently sick or injured.
Got it. And the article from Healthy Systems provides some helpful examples here. We are talking about things like wheelchairs, oxygen tanks, prosthetics, bone growth simulators, and walkers.
Yeah, the essentials for home recovery.
Right. The source also notes that DME now makes up 28% of total medical equipment costs in workers' compensation systems.
Which makes total sense when you think about the nature of workers' comp. If someone suffers a severe workplace injury, a significant portion of their long-term recovery and rehabilitation is going to take place at home, requiring exactly this type of durable equipment.
That's a good point. But that alone doesn't fully explain the 87% spike across the board.
No, it doesn't.
If we look at the broader demographic shifts the article points out, we are seeing an increasing penetration of home healthcare services in general, like more carers moving out of the clinical setting and into the living room.
Yeah, the whole aging in place movement.
Exactly. Combine that with a high occurrence of chronic conditions and a rapidly rising elderly population, and the demand curve starts to make a lot of sense. Think of DME like buying a heavy-duty home appliance.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, it's built to last for years, but suddenly, due to an aging population and more care moving to the home, everybody needs a new one all at once.
Right, you have high sustained demand driven by an aging population.
Mm-hmm.
But demand alone doesn't break a system. When you combine that surging demand with a constant, rapid stream of brand new, highly specialized medical products hitting the market, you create a perfect storm where costs can easily spiral if they aren't tracked meticulously.
So we have a highly regulated healthcare system, yet a massive portion of all equipment spending is essentially a black box. How does the coding system actually allow that much money to slip through unseen? I'm trying to square the idea of strict medical billing with the reality of runaway costs.
Well, the answer lies in the mechanics of how these items are coded. In medical billing, there is a framework called the Healthcare Common Procedure Coding System, or HCPCS.
Right, the HCPCS codes.
Exactly. It's designed to classify every single medical supply so that it can be billed and reimbursed properly. Every item is supposed to get a specific code.
But the Healthy Systems data reveals an alarming reality about how that system is functioning in practice. Over half of DME spend every single year is classified under a miscellaneous code. More than 50%. And out of all the miscellaneous codes that exist, there is one absolute star of the show. It is code E1399.
Yes. E1399 is officially designated as DME miscellaneous, and its dominance in the billing landscape is difficult to overstate. By 2025, this single miscellaneous code made up 25% of all DME spend.
Wait, a quarter of the total spend is sitting in one miscellaneous bucket.
Yes, a full quarter.
It's like getting a massive restaurant bill, but half the total is just listed under a line item called food. How are you supposed to know what you actually paid for?
You really can't. And what's fascinating here is tracing that growth trajectory, because it didn't happen overnight. According to the data, the cost share of E1399 almost doubled from 6% in service year 2012 to 11% in 2020. And then it accelerated even faster, hitting 16% in 2024 and now 25% in 2025.
But wait, if E1399 is supposed to be for truly miscellaneous rare items, why is it taking over a quarter of the market? Shouldn't a product need a specific code to even be legally sold and billed at volume?
In theory, yes. But the medical device industry innovates much faster than the administrative coding system can process. E1399 acts as a massive catch-all bucket for new products that simply do not have a specific designated code yet. Getting a unique code takes time, review, and administrative approval. While that process plays out, new devices default into E1399. In 2025 alone, Healthy Systems tracked over 600 brand new products hitting the market under that one single miscellaneous code.
600 new products in 1 year. I mean, if an item in the E1399 bucket isn't bound by traditional specific fee schedules, there seems to be a structural advantage for these items to remain unclassified.
There absolutely is.
If the reimbursement amounts for E1399 vary wildly depending on the payer and the documentation provided, staying in the miscellaneous category allows for widely varying pricing.
Precisely. That lack of visibility creates a cascading effect across the entire system. Because E1399 masks thousands of different products under one umbrella, it completely obscures the fundamental transaction.
Right.
If an insurance company or a workers' comp program receives a bill for E1399, they don't actually know what the specific product is. And without knowing the product, it becomes impossible to check patient eligibility.
So they can't ask, does this patient actually need this specific device? Because the system literally won't tell them what the device is.
Exactly. They cannot verify clinical appropriateness. You might have products in that bucket that aren't high volume, but they are incredibly expensive, big-ticket items, bypassing the usual scrutiny.
Well, since E1399 masks the actual items, let's look inside the box. What exactly is hiding inside this miscellaneous category right now?
Good question.
The Healthy Systems article highlights two specific trends hitting the market that fall into this bucket, and the first one is photobiomodulation, or PBM, therapy devices. We saw 20 new PBM products hit the market in 2025 alone.
Right. These devices are marketed primarily to treat acute musculoskeletal injuries, and there is also discussion in the industry about their potential application for concussions and traumatic brain injury.
Photobiomodulation sounds incredibly advanced. What is the actual mechanism here? Like, how are these devices supposed to work?
The theory behind PBM relies on light therapy. These devices use specific wavelengths of red and near-infrared light.
Okay.
The idea is that these specific wavelengths penetrate the skin and are absorbed by the mitochondria, which are, the powerhouses of your cells.
Right, 8th grade biology coming back to me.
Exactly. The marketing claims that this absorption stimulates the mitochondria to produce more energy, thereby accelerating tissue repair and reducing inflammation.
That is a fascinating biological premise, but we have to look at what the clinical data actually supports. The Healthy Systems article points out a major caveat. A 2025 review of clinical studies found that there is currently insufficient clinical evidence to suggest these PDM devices are actually an effective modality for pain relief, swelling, inflammation, or wound healing. The review concluded that we need more high-quality trials before widespread clinical adoption makes any sense.
The clinical reality simply hasn't caught up to the proposed mechanism yet. And that brings us to the second category, hiding in the E1399 bucket, thermal compression therapy devices.
Now, thermal compression is essentially hot and cold therapy, right?
Yes, the underlying concept is very traditional. These are portable, often motorized units designed to provide active hot and cold therapy, usually to treat pain and inflammation after an injury or a surgery. And despite the underlying therapy being quite old, more than 50 new thermal compression products launched just last year and fell into this miscellaneous code.
But again, the data presents a significant caveat. According to the source, there is no significant clinical evidence showing that these portable thermal compression units perform any better than your standard, inexpensive ice packs or reusable gel packs.
Right.
Think about the implications of that for a second. You might be paying a premium price for a high-tech thermal device when the data shows a traditional ice pack works just as well.
It forces a necessary conversation about value. These PDM and thermal compression devices are often big-ticket items. When they bypass normal clinical scrutiny because they sit safely inside the E1399 miscellaneous category, it drives up the overall cost share of the system without guaranteeing any significantly better outcomes for the patient.
And when a system has this much ambiguity, it doesn't just lead to overpaying for high-tech ice packs. The source article points out that low visibility creates profound vulnerabilities for actual bad actors to exploit the system.
Unfortunately, yes. Fraud often thrives in the gaps between administrative systems. The article highlights a stark, real-world example of this.
Yeah, this part was wild.
In early 2026, a federal grand jury indicted the former chief executive officer and the chief operating officer of a medical device company called Zynex, Inc.
These were severe federal charges. The indictment included conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, securities fraud, and mail fraud. What exactly were the mechanics of what they were doing?
According to the indictment detailed in the source, Zynex was submitting fraudulent billings on a massive scale. They were billing payers for medical devices and supplies that were not medically necessary, that were not covered by the patient's insurance, and that were not even agreed to by the patients themselves.
The detail regarding the patients really stands out to me. Patients were actively contacting the company, asking them to stop sending supplies because they didn't need them, and the company just ignored the requests, continuing to auto-ship the supplies and bill the system every single time.
Unbelievable.
How does a company manage to auto-ship unnecessary supplies for that long without the billing software catching it?
It comes back to how systems attempt to monitor costs. Payers often rely on cost-based dollar thresholds to flag suspicious activity. If a bill comes in for $10,000, it gets flagged for manual review. But if an item falls beneath that high dollar threshold, automated systems often just approve and pay it. Furthermore, the indictment noted that fluctuating the prices of these small items help to hide the billing patterns from automated detection software.
It's like a bouncer who only stops people carrying giant kegs of beer while completely ignoring the guy sneaking in 50 tiny flasks in his coat.
That is exactly what it is.
If the system only flags a purchase when it hits a massive number, but a bad vendor is fraudulently billing for $90 replacement pads thousands of times a month, the dollar threshold completely fails. I mean, if you can't see what's in the box, how can you stop a bad vendor from shipping it?
You can't. The reliance on those arbitrary dollar limits is what Healthy Systems refers to as a blunt measure. And it is why the article heavily advocates for a structural solution and product-level visibility.
Right. We need to shift from using blunt instruments to surgical precision. Product-level visibility means the bouncer actually checks inside the coat. It means moving away from those blunt dollar thresholds and demanding specific data so that payers know exactly what is being dispensed, how often it is being dispensed, and by whom.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, transparency is the foundational tool that allows a healthcare system to function logically. When you have product-level visibility, payers can finally apply evidence-based treatment guidelines. They can look at a bill and say, we see this as a PBM device, and the current clinical evidence does not support this use case.
It also allows them to identify problematic vendors directly. If you can see the exact product and frequency, you can spot the pattern of fraudulent auto shipping, take corrective action, and ultimately protect the patient from the waste and frustration of receiving medical supplies they do not need and did not ask for.
It shifts the power dynamic entirely. By demanding specific data, the system removes the ambiguity that allows both runaway costs and fraudulent behavior to hide.
So let's recap the journey we've taken through this deep dive. We started by looking at the staggering 87% surge in average medical equipment costs, driven heavily by the rising demand for durable medical equipment as the population ages and care moves into the home.
Right, and then we explored the mechanics of the E1399 loophole, how a single administrative code designed for miscellaneous items has grown to consume a quarter of all DME spend, masking thousands of new products from scrutiny.
We looked inside that miscellaneous box and found an influx of devices, like photobiomodulation and thermal compression units, that currently lack the robust clinical evidence to back up their premium price tags over standard, inexpensive treatments.
Yeah, fancy ice packs.
Exactly. And finally, we saw how that same lack of visibility enables outright fraud, using the Zynex indictment to understand why product-level transparency is the absolute key to combating both rising costs and bad actors.
The analysis by Healthy Systems clearly illustrates that the path forward requires better, more precise data.
Which leaves you with a final thought to ponder. We know that medical technology is going to continue to innovate at a breakneck pace. We are going to see hundreds, if not thousands, of new devices hitting the market every single year. The question is, will our administrative and coding systems ever truly be able to catch up and categorize innovation in real time? Or are we destined to always have a miscellaneous drawer on our medical receipt that just grows larger, more ambiguous, and more expensive every single year?
It's an ongoing race between medical innovation and administrative oversight.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden drivers of medical equipment costs. Next time you look at a receipt, you might just pay a little more attention to the miscellaneous stuff. Until next time.